Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next edition of AmiSights. I'm Ami Kissar, your host, along with my co-host, Lynn Ozer, a.k.a. SBA Queen.
Hello.
Hello, Lynn. Today, I'm so excited to have my friend and EO mate, Emeka Oguh, with us. He's the founder and CEO of PeopleJoy. We're so excited to learn about his entrepreneurial journey. Thank you for being with us, buddy.
Thanks, Ami. Thanks, Lynn. Thanks for having me.
So nice to meet you.
You too.
Lynn always has the best first question.
When did you get the entrepreneurial bug?
That's a great question. I would say the first entrepreneur bug probably when I was a kid, like 7, 8, 9 years old. I grew up with an older sister, so I used to just always want to do what she did. And she used to learn my mom taught her how to knit and crochet. And so obviously I learned how to do both things. And we used to create like little things like scarves, tablecloths, and things like that. And we would just give it to like family members, like aunts and uncles. And then I remember being in second grade and I told my teacher what I did. And she's like, "Oh, this is great. Like, can you guys make me a scarf?" And I said, "Absolutely." And so I went to my older sister and she did all the work. And then essentially, like, I gave it to my teacher and she gave me $5, which at the time was like, this was early 90s, was like $1 million to me. So I was so excited. And then she's like, "Share that with your sister." And I was like, "Oh crap." She did all the work. It was my bigger sister. She was much bigger than me at the time. She said, "She's going to take all the money." So I started to pout. And then she gave me another $5. So this is where I learned management and sort of getting people to do the work. You have the idea, you sort of put it out there. So I was happy about that. Needless to say, I went home. My dad was like, "This is a gift. Give the money back." And so I made no money off of that first venture. But that was the first sort of business of like creating a product or service or a good in exchange for, for money that was that.
Did the teacher take the money back?
She did. The teachers don't make a lot, so that was just a kindness of her heart to even
That's
get
for sure.
So it all worked out at the end of the day.
And what did your sister say about that? Did she want the money?
Of course she did. She's a pharmacist though now. She's doing quite all right. So she's
Good for her.
But that was that was probably the first you talk about lemonade stand sort of thing. That was the version of a lemonade stand. Was that?
It was great.
So did you get in the business then of selling crochet stuff and stuff?
So surprisingly, I wasn't the best at that. So that was something I retired in early. I just realized that the crocheting and knitting thing was a nice, probably way for my mom to keep me quiet and not running around going crazy. But
But you were obviously interested in business, so you pursued
right.
that. You pursued that when you went to school?
So actually, I studied electrical engineering, electrical and computer engineering when I was an undergrad. And then I worked on Wall Street right after school, initially in technology as a project manager. And then I moved over to the finance side where I worked in our investment management and guidance team, where I helped oversee $315 billion in assets under management. So I was very much on the finance track, I think at the beginning part of my career and, working within a large investment bank. And it really gave me a lot of just structure in how businesses run, how to build scalable companies, and more importantly, how to work with people. I think those are just invaluable skills for every entrepreneur. And I always encourage people like, hey, before you go out and do your own thing, work for somebody, work for a large company and build that structure because you're not going to learn how to build that if you've never seen it beforehand, becoming an entrepreneur. But after
Very good
business
advice.
school, thank you. After business school, I caught business school is when I caught the startup bug. I did a sort of a mid-year internship with a startup in Boston, and started looking at local startups in the area. HubSpot, for example, before they IPO'd, they were like really early stages there. I got to kind of go to some of their jam sessions and sales sessions, and just really kind of see these early stage SaaS startups. I think coming out of business school, I knew I wanted to start a company. I just didn't feel ready yet. And so they say the best way to learn is on somebody else's dime. So I joined a fintech company in New York as their first business hire and their first product man. And, stayed there for a few years. We went from, small company to $1 billion valuation in that time frame. So it was a good experience for me to sort of just see the entrepreneur journey through somebody else's lens and add value to that company. But at the same time, learn what I needed to learn, knowing that, hey, this is a stepping stone. At some point, I'm going to go off and start my own company.
So when did that happen?
So that was 2011 to 2014.
Okay.
And what were you doing there? What was your first company?
The first company that I built, or the first
The
startup that I
one
was
you
part
built.
of? Yeah, so I started it was a mobile app publishing company called At Tempo. And what we did was uh we we acquired, this was around, it was a mobile app publishing company, and this was again around 2013, 14. What we did was acquire IP apps from other app developers that were kind of 90% complete. And then we focused on that last 10% and really marketing these apps. So this was when the App Store was just first really opening, and it was going from paid apps to freemium apps. And what we essentially did was we would integrate third-party ad networks into these apps and put them on the market. And I like to call it, basically, I got paid to provide apps that basically advertise other apps, and I got paid off of that. And it was a long tail strategy. So really what we were focusing on was, like, instead of building a blockbuster app that could generate, millions of dollars, release several sort of long tail apps that maybe could generate anywhere between like a couple thousand to 50,000 a year, but then have a large number of those. So at one point I had about 400 mobile apps on the App Store in various shapes and sizes. And then we ended up selling that, and a few years later, to a roll-up company that basically was acquiring revenue generating companies like ours and putting it into a larger portfolio. So that was my first foray into uh, entrepreneurship on my own. And I can't say I thought of the idea on my own. Somebody else, like, that I knew, a good friend of mine, had a similar business strategy. And I was at a point in my startup where I was looking for something to do, like something else. And he was like, "Hey, I have this opportunity. You should learn about it." Learned about it. I was like, "This is interesting." Started playing around on the mobile app store, published one app, two apps, hired a team, and then it sort of took off. But yeah, so that was the first company.
Was it difficult to hire people at the time, or what was your hiring strategy?
Um, it it it's always difficult to hire people. I think hiring the right people is always difficult. But one of the things that I had done when I was, again, I mentioned, like, after business school, I joined the startup in New York. Um, we 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 did a lot of work hiring people, like offshore talent, using platforms like, it was called Odesk at the time. Now it's called Upwork. At one point, we were like the top 1% of hires on this platform, alongside Google, Microsoft. Again, we're on, a lot of people had this strategy. And so I have built up a really good skill set of just sourcing talent, like fractional talent and international talent, off of Upwork. So I was able to apply that strategy at the new company, and just, built a virtual team off of Upwork. And it was bootstrapped. So the entire thing was bootstrapped. We didn't take any outside funding, and this was having come from a company where we raised $500 million to sort of go in and building a bootstrap company. So a very different structure. Like, you have to sort of really focus on building revenue first and then growing a company. And so it was a bootstrap business, which I've sort of built a skill set in.
How did that feel, going from the big venture back thing to your own startup grind?
Exciting and terrifying. So, like, 6 months before I started this venture and quit, I had gotten married, and my wife was in the middle of medical school. So she's borrowing money for student loans, and I'm essentially, covering both of us. And I'm like, "Hey, I'm ready to quit. I'm going to start this thing." So it was a leap of faith. So I'll just say, the secret to a successful being an entrepreneur and having a successful marriage is having your spouse's buy-in. Tell you that 100%. And so she supported. She was like, "Yeah, let's do it." But I was smart about it. I saved some money, and made sure I covered like a year's worth of living expenses and things like that. I had some capital put away, and so that, I told myself, "Hey, if this doesn't work out in a year, I'll just go find a job or something like that. And, luckily it worked out.
Awesome. What was the next chapter?
Yeah. So after we exited the company, I took some time I wanted to spend time to figure out what I wanted to do. And I knew I wanted to do something that was impactful, still in technology, still in finance. And so I really spent some time just exploring and just figuring out like, hey, where are the opportunities? What are the challenges and pain points in areas that I'm really passionate about? And financial wellness is just an area that I've just always been super passionate about. Um, you know, my mom's an accountant, so she's very, very smart with money. And she taught me a lot of my early sort of money principles as far as like saving, investing, living below your means, compound interest, and the importance of paying off debt early, things like mortgages and credit card. And, to this day, she doesn't have a credit card. Right. And she'll tell you, you don't need a credit card to have credit history. Pay your bills on time. You'll get in, you'll have credit history. And so I wanted to build something around helping people remove the roadblocks to financial freedom, debt being the biggest one of those. And I wanted also to do something that was personal to me. And so I mentioned to you that when I started my first company, my wife was in medical school and had student debt. I had also had student loans from business school. So between both of us, we had over 400,000 in student loans. And I remember just navigating those journeys, right? Like how do you save for retirement? How do you save for a wedding? You're living in New York, you've got student loans, and you've got to save, like you have to save for an engagement ring and all those things. And so these are just things that you learn to navigate. But I just realized these are struggles that a lot of people were dealing with, and not just millennials, Generation X, baby boomers, for example, have high amounts of student debt as well. And so the original focus of PeopleJoy was how do we and still is, so how do we remove these roadblocks to financial freedom, primarily debt, and how do we do it in a scalable way, in a platform that aligns with where consumers go for their financial advice. And again, having worked in Merrill Lynch in investment management and guidance and having interacted with a lot of financial advisors, I've seen different ways and models of how these things are being approached in the consumer market. We started with the intention of, hey, we wanted to build something that partnered with employers. One, just a lower customer acquisition cost, right? If if I can go work with an employer and they can put me in front of their employees, I don't have to pay for each individual person that I come in contact with. Whereas if I'm trying to advertise and market to folks on, Facebook or Google, it's a pay per click, and it's really expensive and financial services is a very crowded space for advertising, right? And then two, the what's in it for employers is also very high, right? If we can create a product that helps address this pain point, but at the same time helps employers attract and retain talent, it's a win-win for everybody. And so the first product we built was student loan repayment assistance, which think of it as like what a 401k is to retirement. Student loan repayment assistance is to student loans. So how a 401k works is you put $1 in and your employer can match that dollar up to a certain amount. Student loan repayment assistance works the same way. You put $1 in and your employer can match that to a certain amount. And so we were pushing this concept, and we were telling employers, look, you have this amazing retirement benefit, but like your population with student debt is not contributing to it because they have student loans. And I remember being in that situation. If you're living in Manhattan, you're paying $2,000 a month for your apartment. And
Least.
this was 2013, by the way. This is not
Or
not adjusted for inflation. It's probably like equivalent of $4,000 now. But like,
Exactly.
$2,000 a month, and this is with roommates, and this is your portion of the rent, not the total rent, right? You've got a $2,000 a month student loan, and then you've got living expenses. It's not like living isn't going, it's going out of style, right? You still got to go out and eat and whatnot. What are you putting to your 401k afterwards? Like what's left? And so we're telling employers like, look, if you meet them where they are, right? Oh well, Mecca, we're giving the webinars talking about the delayed compound interest, and if you don't start investing in your retirement today, you're going to miss out. But they're still not putting to their retirement. The solution: more webinars. I guess the webinars is not going to change the financial math, right? They don't have the money to put towards retirement. You can talk to your blue in the face, but that's not going to turn a negative bank account to a positive one. And so we convinced a few companies to do this because the pushback we always get was, why don't I just give them cash? Well, if you give somebody cash and the assumption they're going to be responsible with that cash, that's a very strong assumption. Some people will, others will just take it and spend it on other things. And so it's important that the money that you give goes directly to pay down the debt. Because if you just give them cash, it might get distracted, let's just say, on the way to paying off that debt. And so we did that. And it's funny enough, like 5 years later, that became a tax exempt benefit. At the time, it was taxable. So I used to say we really built a payroll company because we had to run it through federal tax, state tax, local tax, imputed income, make sure that money for that employer contribution wasn't going to the 401k. So it was a really complex software that we built, which got a lot easier when Congress uh, updated Section 127 to make that contribution, employer contribution tax free from 2020 onwards, and that just actually got grandfathered in this past year. So that was the first product we built. And then since then, we really have expanded our surface area of financial wellness products, all really sort of around that education theme. So we've added tuition assistance. So another way to remove the roadblock to financial freedom is to upskill your employee to get a job, management job or another job within your company that pays more, right? Because then they can use that higher salary to pay off debt and so on and so forth. So that could be for hospitals, taking a frontline worker and making them a nurse, taking a CRNA and some sort of BSN and be someone with a bachelor's in nursing and helping them get a master's in nursing, so on and so forth. So there's different ways that you can upskill staff. And so we've added that to our platform. And then we help some employers tap into federal programs that will forgive student debt, like the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program that has a high rate of failure for folks who try to do it on their own. We've built software and solutions to help people navigate those journeys and actually get forgiveness by the government, right? Which is government paid for, so the employer doesn't have to pay a penny. So those are, from where we started to where we are now, how the program has evolved. But the why behind it was that financial freedom and that inner passion. And that's another piece of advice that I give folks is just that, like, if you truly intend to be, if this is something that you truly matters to you, build it around something that matters to you. If you're just trying to get rich quick, if it works out, great. But if it doesn't, I think a lot of startups fail. Sometimes people just give up, and they give up because it truly wasn't the passion for them. Like, I could tell you, I'm an investor. I have cryptocurrency, but I don't care about crypto enough to do a crypto startup. It just isn't me. If I did it, it would be with the expectation that I expect this thing to be sold in 2 or 3 years, right? And I would build it like that. But then if the market bottoms out and there's no more investors or attractiveness for that, I'm going to be like, why the hell am I in crypto? I don't care about this, right? And so I think having that underlying passion for what you do is what sustains you in periods where maybe the market is not in your favor and then people aren't out there giving you dollars or investing in you. That's where you have those moments where it's like, do I really care about this? And so I think having that passion is why we've, been able to just go through the normal cycles of business, the ups and the downs of growing a business.
How's it going, Emeka? How do you feel about where you are today?
I feel great. It's, I think one is never a better time to be in business. It's just gotten so much easier with AI out there really helps, I think, companies be more efficient. I feel more efficient, right? Just being able to leverage tools like that to our advantage. There's been some federal legislative changes in our market that has also lifted just the market in general, and a rising tide raises all ships. And that I think pushes it. So for example, there are certain federal changes the government is limiting the amount of federal funding for education. And so what that means is that there are going to be less dollars from the government for nurses, for people to become nurses, people to become doctors, people to become teachers, right? And so one could look at it and say, okay, wow, there's going to be a shortage of these things. We should panic. We're going to employers and saying, you can be that in between to fill that gap in exchange for that employee working for you for a period of time. So you get to upskill your workforce and you get retention, right? So because we are an employer solution, these changes are pushing for more private sector solutions. And so I think it's just a great time to be in our space. And the trends are moving in that direction. You're seeing a lot more employers looking at, hey, how do we pay off employee student debt? How do we help upskill our workforce? Because it's just cheaper to retain your current employees than hire somebody externally. Employers are used to 3% cost of living adjustments. If you hire somebody to replace that individual, you might be paying 20, 30, 40% more. And so employers are realizing like, wow, the best strategy going forward is to upskill my staff, right? And then also a lot of the industries we target are growing right now. So uh, it's been going great.
How have you funded it?
So the first funding was self-funded. Again, I'm a, I'm a risk taker. So last company I sold, paid off some debt and then just put it all in PeopleJoy. And then we took some, friends, family, fools. We did have some initial investors, and then we just grew it organically. And it forced us to really think through pricing. Pricing is really hard in the enterprise space, like having to get it right, right? You don't want to be so low that it just requires mass wide scale adoption to make it work. That's where you do need the outside funding, and you can't price it so high where it's like, just turns folks off. So getting that right balance was super important. I'm not saying we figured it out on the way. We definitely have some learning years, but yeah, it was, we took some outside funding, a small amount, and then we just bootstrapped and hustled. So all the things that are required to bootstrap and hustle, we've done to get it going.
That's great. Is your sales pitch to the employee benefits person in a big company? That's who your target audience is?
It's typically the chief human resource officer, the chief executive officer, or the CFO. Really, do you believe that it's cheaper to retain employees and hire new ones, right? If you fundamentally believe that, then we can start talking. If you're like, no, it's cheaper to hire new people, then we're probably not a fit, right? Because we really are more so of a retention and upskilling strategy. And so if you believe that, and then the next question is, do you believe what is the value of employee benefits within that? Because you could simply say, just pay my people more, but that gets tough real fast.
What
Yeah.
size companies do you go after?
5,000 employees and up. So I would say, we're typically large enterprises. Our sweet spot tend to be large health systems, primarily because they have just huge turnover and they're just, for all the reasons I mentioned, as far as like funding going on to replace nurses and things like that. You have a retiring workforce. It's very expensive to get these degrees, and it's just high burnout, right? So I would say that education, again, almost a very similar profile, high burnout, shortage of folks, engineering, retail, like, so there's finance, there's various areas, but the theme is the same. That like, do we believe that upskilling and figuring out ways to retain our current employees is a better, more effective strategy than just replacing and recruiting, right?
And how many employees do you have?
Yeah. So we're still under 25 employees. I like to say we're lean and mean. We've really leveraged technology wherever we can to augment our staff. And I like to say, look, we can go two ways. I can hire more people, or I can pay you more as we grow. And I think most of the team is elected to the latter, and it works for us. And we have great retention. I think the average person's been on our team for like 3 or 4 years, and we're across 3 different countries in multiple time zones. So we have an international team, which is great. I think for me, it's just really big to just get diversity of thought, perspective on the team. And so we've been, say, virtual from inception. It was always the um, the goal of the company.
Okay.
If you had a picture 3 years from now, what would it look like?
Yeah, for us, it would be, we are in, we're in 25% of the Fortune 500, right? We're in 30%, 30% of health systems, and there's
You are
5,000.
there. That's your goal.
That's
That's the
that's the
goal.
goal. That's the goal, right? And so to do that, where do we have to be? What do we have to do in the next 3 years? Just really focusing on distribution, right? Making sure we are partnered with the right companies that share our goals, share our vision, share our values, and leveraging that to be complementary to what they do. So that's really what I spend a lot of time thinking about. It's just, and then how do we stay innovative? How do we stay top of mind? What are the things that employers are thinking about in this space 2 or 3 years from now, and making sure we're prepared for that, and just constantly innovating. So, um, you know, the mix of what we offer today versus 3 years from now is probably going to change. We have some exciting, not ready to be mentioned products that we're working on to really sort of tap into that. But I think it's really going to be the future for us. We're thinking of just upskilling workforce. Just if you think about it, just the change, the technology, the change of advancement is so rapid right now that there's going to be this huge skills gap, and it's going to have to be filled. And and I think that the traditional way of filling it, which is hiring somebody from a traditional 4-year university, is going to change. And how is that going to change, and what does that new world look like? Is a lot of where we're spending time thinking about and making sure we're prepared for, making sure our partners are prepared for.
Yeah, do you see you mentioned that you are using AI, and how is AI affecting your clients, your customers, your potential customers, and the companies that you are
Yeah,
targeting?
I think there to a large part. I just came from a conference 2 weeks ago. They're still trying to figure it out, right?
Hmm.
And I
And
think what folks are saying for the most part is that, like, it's how can AI make us more efficient. So people aren't looking to the folks that we're talking to that we work with aren't looking to, like, lay off staff. It's just, how do I make my staff more efficient so they're doing, how can I use AI so that maybe somebody I hired to move paper from one side of the desk to the next. I'm just just illustrating the point. AI can do that, and now I can take this person and have them doing something a bit more complex, like a little bit more high value add for my team. And so we're seeing HR folks looking at, how do I use AI to resolve some of the admin tasks that I usually, outsource to somebody. How do I use AI to do better applicant screening and things like that? How do I use AI to sort of, look at, okay, for this benefit mix, how does it help retention? Are there certain profiles that attract, they use certain benefits, and how does that mix impact the ROI of this plant, or this medical building, or the output, and things like that? And so using AI to take disparate forms of data and make sense of it and make better decisions is what we're seeing. And so it's evolving. I think last year was all about prompt engineering. This year is all about agents. Next year is going to be about something else. Like, individuals are going to need to be trained on it. So, that's internally, we're looking at it for just, how do we make our customer support team more efficient? Again, same thing. How do we use it to, be that first line of defense? I believe that for us, we're always going to have a human in the loop. That's what makes us different. That's what makes us special. We believe, especially in the financial wellness space, we believe that individuals ultimately do want to talk to a human being. When it comes to things like that. But behind the scenes, my belief is that AI won't replace humans. Humans that use AI will replace humans that don't use AI, right? Like, that's essentially how we look at it. And, I think that a lot of the folks that we're talking to, that we're helping, uh, think that they think the same way too. Like, I don't think anybody is going to want, open heart surgery done by an AI machine. I think you still want a surgeon or somebody to sort of do that for you, and things like that. And so, but, like, will AI be able to tell that surgeon, hey, based on this person's history, or that anesthesiologist, these compounds aren't safe, or this might lead to, that's where I think it can come in, and sort of add value in various ways. Can we use AI to say, hey, based on this person's spend pattern, they're about to go into default or miss a loan payment, and use that to trigger a checking call. Hey, how's it going? Right. I think that's where it can really add value, is allowing companies to stay lean and grow without sacrificing quality.
y- the world's, I think, the work world is going to be fundamentally different in a decade. And if anyone tells you they have a clear picture of what that's going to look like, they
Right.
have no idea. And there are a lot of people out there pretending to be AI experts. I don't think anyone is an AI expert yet. But if you
Yeah.
don't start putting your pinkies in the water and your toes in the water and start testing and learning, you're going to lose the race.
100%. Couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, it's just, and that's something that I've pushed our team to just do, get involved with it. Like the one thing I will say, and I've, it's, and I get this conversation a lot, and it's a little bit off topic, but it's, is AI replacing the work that used to go to entry level workers, fresh out of school? And that's where I think that's my biggest concern, because and there was an HBR article about this, about the importance of employers still hiring for those roles, even if an AI can do it just as well, because it's like, you have to go through that, right? I can use AI as a tool because I can look at a response and say, no, that doesn't make any sense, right? But that's years of being a research analyst and being a business analyst and sort of going in and knowing how to fact check and things like that. But if I just came out of school and I never had that opportunity, and I'm just trusting what this thing spits out, that is dangerous, right?
Yeah,
It's that.
agree.
It can make you late. If you're not careful, it can make you so lazy.
Exactly. And so, like, we need those folks to be able to know how to question it and know to say, no, this isn't right. And you only do that by trial and error, by going through muscle memory. You only do that by drafting those reports by hand and researching it and putting it together, not just saying, hey, here's a thought, put it in, an AI tool and say, do this, solve this for me. Like, you have to go through that piece of it. And that's what makes the best type of manager and leader, is somebody who's had that. And I feel that, like, we're going to be in an even tougher spot in 10 years from now if we don't have the next wave of leaders don't have that background. Because then now, who do I have to replace me? If I'll, some can argue that AI can, but no, I think you still need that human in the loop, right? To be able to make that final decision. And that's where I think, my biggest concern 10 years from now is do we have this generation that didn't have that? I mean, you already see, like, the COVID generation, right? The folks that stayed at home and didn't have that interaction in school. Like, we see that impact, and that was just a 2 or 3 year
Right.
stint. So,
That's right.
this is even bigger. You have folks who maybe would have, we see, consulting firms aren't hiring as many, first year students and things like that than they did in previous years. And so that's just, again, I don't have, like you said, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but those are some of
The
the
questions.
questions. Yeah.
This is mind-boggling to me. This weekend, I had to do I had to give a new keynote this week virtually, right? And I pushed off getting ready, pushed off getting ready, pushed off getting ready, and I start down on Saturday. And usually, to prepare a whole new presentation, probably 20 to 30 hours of work. Okay. I said, and I've been working hard to try find ways to AI to help me be an assistant, but not a replacement. I got my presentation done in about 4 hours. And you know what? It's probably better.
Wow.
Now, if I'd taken the first draft and just said, great,
Right.
it would have sucked. But if you work back and forth with it, and I'm probably using 5% of the tools that are out there.
Right. No, 100%. Um, I joke that I tell my wife, like, if anything, AI has replaced the time I used to work with her. Like, 'cause I call her my unofficial COO, because, like you on me, like, if I'm preparing for a keynote or something like that, I like to bounce ideas off of people. What do you think about this and whatnot? And now I have this AI tool to bounce things off of, critique and push back and
But it
whatnot.
leads you into this false sense of security. You got to be really careful. Like, I mean, I remember back when eBay was a hot thing, and you just assumed that you were in an auction on eBay, you were going to get the better price,
Yeah. So
right?
it's, yeah, right. Biggest hack for me on that was, because you're right. It'll say, you're great. This is amazing, amazing, Emeka, amazing, Ami. That's a brilliant assessment, right? And then one of the things I started doing recently was just, I would prompt, like, what's wrong with this? What's wrong with this assessment? And it would critique itself. And I would, part of me is like, well, why didn't you tell me that the first time? But if you think like us as human beings, if, how many times have we written a paper and your professor is like, not good enough? And then you go back and revise it and make it better. So it's no different than the human experience of, like, putting your first iteration out there, and then somebody challenges it, and then you're like, actually, yeah, I can dig deeper. Actually, you're right. That's an insight I hadn't thought of. And so I think it's important to like you said, put those guardrails in place, question it, critique it, challenge it, and don't just run off with.
You can't. I mean, I was working on a legal contract the other day, and I had my lawyer working on it. And I said, well, let's see how smart I am. I put it in AI, and AI came up with like 12 points, right? And I said, let's show the lawyer how smart I was. So I didn't tell him I did it through AI, but I said, I read the contract, and here are the things I think we need to concentrate on. 9 of the 12, he came back, bullshit, 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 bullshit.
Yeah.
And there you go, right?
Right.
And that's the danger of it, because a lot of people think, screw the lawyer, let's go. I don't know. I mean,
right.
Anyway.
Yeah. No, it's like I said, AI in the hands of lawyers are better than us being AI lawyers, right? Like them to be themselves to be more efficient. So I couldn't agree with you more. Like I said, it's going to replace lawyers using AI will probably replace lawyers not using AI, but replacing lawyers completely with AI, I think is good luck. Like you said, like not in the next 5 years for the type of stuff that we need it for. Maybe for
It's been a pleasure to have you on, friend. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Very interesting conversation.
Where do peeps find you? What's the URL?
PeopleJoy.com. And we're hiring for a couple sales folks. It's a couple of account executives, and you could check that out on our LinkedIn page. It's just PeopleJoy.com. So if anybody knows someone who is passionate about financial wellness, complex sales cycles, selling to, enjoys providing value to companies in the form of benefits, definitely let them know about us. We're looking to, add some more leaders to the team.
Love it. Thank you so much. Good to see you.
Great to meet you.
And really appreciate your time. Great story. So thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.